I buried my wife on a Tuesday morning in late October, and I thought the worst thing that could happen to me had already happened. I was wrong. 4 hours after the dirt settled over Eleanor's casket, her old supervisor from the hospital called my cell phone, and the first thing out of his mouth wasn't condolences. It was a warning. Don't eat anything your daughter cooks for you tonight, Marcus. I need you to listen to me very carefully. I thought grief had finally cracked something loose in my head. Then he said the words that turned my blood to ice water. Eleanor came to me 3 weeks ago with a folder, and she told me if anything ever happened to her, I was supposed to give it to you, but only after I made sure you were somewhere safe. Before I tell you anything else, where are you right now, and is anyone else in the room with you? Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from tonight, family. And if you've ever had someone in your own blood turn on you when you were at your weakest, hit that like button and stick with me, because this one is going to hurt before it heals. My name is Marcus Whitfield. I'm 64 years old, and for 36 years I drove a city bus through the streets of Cleveland, Ohio, rain or shine, every route, every shift, until my knees gave out and I retired 2 years ago. I thought I knew people. I thought, after 3.5 decades of watching strangers board that bus every single day, I had a good read on character. I could spot a liar by the way they wouldn't look at the fare box. I could spot a hard worker by the calluses on their hands. But I never once thought to apply that same eye to my own daughter. And that is the mistake that nearly cost me my life. It started at the cemetery. The sky over Cleveland that morning was the color of wet cement, low and heavy, like it was getting ready to grieve right along with us. I stood at the edge of the grave with my hat in my hands, watching the casket lower into the ground, and I felt like somebody had reached into my chest and scooped out everything that used to be warm. Eleanor was my wife of 38 years. She was a nurse, retired now too, the kind of woman who remembered the names of every patient's grandchildren and brought soup to anybody on our street who got sick. She was the reason our house ever felt like a home instead of just 4 walls and a roof. Without her standing next to me, I felt like a man trying to stand on a porch with half the boards missing. I waited for my daughter Renee to step up beside me. I waited for her husband Calvin to put a hand on my back, to say something, anything. Instead, I heard heels clicking on the cemetery path behind me, sharp and quick, the sound of somebody in a hurry. Renee walked up wearing a black dress that was a little too fitted for a funeral, sunglasses pushed up on her head even though there wasn't a drop of sun in the sky, and she was already talking before she reached me. Daddy, I hate to even bring this up today of all days, but Calvin and I really need to sit down with you about the house, maybe this weekend, before things get complicated with probate. I leaned in close to hear her better, and that's when I caught the rest of it, the part she wasn't saying to me. She turned slightly toward Calvin and dropped her voice to a whisper she thought I couldn't catch, but 36 years of straining to hear a passenger mumble their stop from the back of a loud bus had given me ears like a hawk. We need him to sign before he gets a lawyer involved, she hissed. I don't want my brother showing up out of nowhere trying to get a piece of this too. I stood there frozen, staring at the casket, pretending I hadn't heard a single word. Calvin checked his watch, an expensive one I knew for a fact he couldn't afford on a car salesman's commission. And he muttered something about needing to get back before the bank closed. The bank. My wife wasn't even in the ground a full hour, and the only thing on these two people's minds was the bank. Renee caught me looking at her strangely, and immediately rearranged her face into something soft and sorrowful, dabbing at a corner of her eye with a tissue that, as far as I could tell, was bone dry. Daddy, she said, her voice trembling in a way that didn't match the dryness of that tissue. Mama looks so peaceful. We're going to take care of you. I promise. Whatever you need. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. The way I used to study a passenger's face when I suspected they were about to try and skip the fare. I saw the new handbag on her shoulder that cost more than my monthly pension check. I saw the way her eyes kept cutting toward Calvin instead of staying on me. I had raised this girl, to be honest. I had worked double shifts so she could go to community college. Somewhere between then and now, something had gone rotten in her, and I had been too busy living my own life to notice the crack forming. Thank you, baby, I said, my voice coming out rougher than gravel. I just want to go home and rest. Home turned out to be nothing like rest. When Calvin pulled the car into our driveway, there were already a dozen cars lined up along the curb, people I barely recognized walking across my lawn with paper plates of food. Music playing low from a speaker somebody had set up on the porch. Not hymns, not anything solemn, just some upbeat playlist that felt like a slap in the face. "This isn't a repast," I said under my breath as I climbed out of the car. "It's a party." Renee took my arm, gripping it tighter than necessary, steering me toward the front door like I was a stray dog that might wander off. "We're celebrating Mama's life, Daddy," she said. She wouldn't want us sitting around crying all day. Eleanor would have hated every second of that gathering. She was a quiet woman. She liked her evenings on the back porch with a cup of chamomile tea and a crossword puzzle, not a house full of strangers spilling red punch on her good rug. But I didn't have the strength left in me to fight, so I walked into my own living room and felt like a trespasser in the place I'd lived for 30 years. A man I didn't know, somebody's cousin maybe, had his shoes propped up on Eleanor's good ottoman. Somebody else had knocked over the framed photo from our trip to Niagara Falls and just left it lying face down on the bookshelf without picking it up. I pushed through the crowd toward the kitchen, needing a glass of water and a minute away from all those unfamiliar faces, and that's when I saw the boxes stacked in the hallway by the basement stairs. 4 big cardboard boxes, taped shut, sitting there like they'd always belonged. My engineer's instinct, except I wasn't an engineer, I was just a man who'd spent his whole working life noticing what didn't add up, told me something was wrong before my mind even caught up to why. I knelt down and pulled the tape off the closest one. Inside was Eleanor's good church coat, the burgundy wool one she only wore on Easter and Christmas. Underneath it, her recipe box, the metal one with her mother's handwriting still on half the cards. "What is this?" I said, loud enough that it cut clean through the chatter in the hallway. Renee appeared almost instantly, like she'd been watching me the whole time. "Daddy, don't worry about that," she said quickly. "Calvin and I figured we'd help you get a head start on going through Mama's things. No sense letting it pile up. Going through her things." I pulled the coat out and held it against my chest, and it still smelled like her, like lavender soap and the inside of a church on a Sunday morning. "You're throwing her away before we've even read the will," I said, my voice shaking now, and not from sadness. Calvin stepped between us, set a hand on my shoulder that felt more like a grip than a comfort. "Pop," he said, in that slow, patient tone people use on small children. "You're going to be in this big house all by yourself now. You don't need all this clutter weighing you down. We're just trying to help you breathe a little easier. Help me breathe, or help yourselves get a head start on emptying out a house you were already planning to sell." The thought hit me like a fist to the gut. They weren't tidying up. They were erasing her, piece by piece, while her body was still warm in the ground. "Put it back," I said, and I meant it with everything in me. Renee rolled her eyes at me, an honest-to-God eye roll, like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "Fine, we'll deal with it later," she said. "You're just emotional. Go sit in the den, I'll bring you some tea." I didn't go to the den. I went straight to the little room off the garage that used to be my workshop, the only door in the house with a working lock. I turned the deadbolt and stood there with my back against the door, breathing hard, my heart going harder than it had any business going for a man my age. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I let those go to voicemail, but something in my gut, some old instinct from decades of reading strangers, told me to answer it. "Marcus," the voice on the other end said, low and urgent. "This is Walter Greer. I worked with Eleanor at St. Vincent's for almost 15 years. I'm sorry to be calling you today, of all days." I sat down hard in the old folding chair I kept in that workshop. Walter Greer. I remembered the name, the hospital administrator Eleanor used to mention. A serious man, well-respected, somebody she trusted enough to bring home stories about over dinner. "Walter," I said, "I appreciate the call, but I really can't talk right now." "Marcus, listen to me," he said, and his voice had a sharpness to it that made the hair on my arm stand up. "Are you alone right now? Is the door locked?" "Yes," I said slowly. "Why are you asking me that?" "Good," he said. "Keep it locked, and whatever you do, do not drink or eat anything Renee or Calvin hand you tonight. Not tea, not coffee, not a single bite off a plate they made up for you." I gripped the phone tighter. "Walter, what in the world are you talking about? I just buried my wife. I don't have room in me for riddles right now." "This isn't a riddle, Marcus," he said, his voice cracking just slightly. Eleanor came to my office 3 weeks ago. She was scared, Marcus. She told me if anything happened to her suddenly, I was supposed to open a file she gave me and make sure it got to you, but only once I knew you were somewhere safe first. My chest went tight. Eleanor died of a stroke, I said, more to convince myself than him. She had high blood pressure for years. The doctor said it was sudden but not unexpected. That's what everyone was told, Walter said quietly. But Marcus, Eleanor didn't trust that diagnosis. And after what I found in that file this morning, I don't either. I think somebody helped her along. And I think you might be next on the list. The room tilted under me. I thought of my daughter at the cemetery, whispering about getting me to sign before her brother found out. I thought of Calvin's watch he couldn't afford, the boxes already taped shut in my hallway. That's not possible, I whispered. Renee is my daughter. She's not a killer. No, Walter agreed, but she's desperate, and desperate people convince themselves of terrible things when there's money on the line. I have files Eleanor uploaded to a private cloud account months ago, recordings, documents, things I can't explain over the phone. You need to get out of that house right now. A fist pounded on the workshop door, and I nearly dropped the phone. Daddy, Renee's voice came through, syrupy sweet. I made you some chamomile, just how Mama used to make it. Come on out and drink it, it'll calm your nerves. I stared at that door like it was a living thing. Chamomile. Eleanor drank chamomile every single night for 38 years. Renee never once in her adult life made a cup of tea for anybody but herself. How did you know I liked chamomile? I thought, my mind racing. You don't know a single thing about me except what's in my bank account. Walter's voice in my ear was steady, an anchor in the storm. Don't open that door, Marcus. Is there another way out of that room? There's a side window, I breathed. Leads out to the garden. Take it now, Walter said. Get to the main road. Call a cab. Do not use your own truck. They might be watching it. Come to St. Vincent's, the east loading dock. I'll have security let you through. Tell them you're there to see Administrator Greer. I understand, I said, and I hung up before I could talk myself out of it. I was 64 years old with a bad hip and worse knees. But fear does something to an old man's body that no amount of physical therapy ever managed. I slid that window open as quiet as I could and climbed out into the cold evening air, dropping into the hydrangea bushes Eleanor had planted the spring before she passed. I scraped my hand on a branch and didn't even feel it. I ran past the cars lined up along my own curb, past strangers eating off my wife's good china, and I didn't stop until 3 blocks later when my lungs were burning and my legs felt like they belonged to somebody else. The cab driver who picked me up didn't ask questions, just drove where I told him, gospel radio, playing low on the dash. 40 minutes later, I stood at the east loading dock of St. Vincent's Hospital, and Walter Greer was already waiting, looking older and more tired than I remembered him, his tie loosened, his hands trembling slightly as he led me through a back hallway to a small administrative office. He shut the door behind us and locked it. Sit down, Marcus, he said. I walked in, but I didn't sit. I froze, because in the corner of that office, zip-tied to a folding chair with a strip of medical tape over his mouth, was a man in a wrinkled gray suit, eyes wide with panic. I knew that face. It was Gerald Pruitt, the family lawyer who'd drawn up Eleanor's and my will 11 years ago. What is this? I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Walter, you can't just tie a man to a chair. This is kidnapping. This is an interrogation, Walter said, calm as still water. He walked behind the desk and slid a thick manila folder across to me. Read the label. In Eleanor's handwriting, neat and looping, the way she signed every birthday card she ever gave me, the folder read, Operation Safe Harbor. I opened it with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The first page wasn't a legal document at all. It was a transcript, a typed-out recording of a conversation between Gerald, Renee, and Calvin, dated almost 4 months ago. Renee's voice on the page, cold in a way I'd never heard her sound to my face. How much longer is he going to hang on? We can't keep floating these payments on a man's pension. Gerald's typed response chilled me worse than the cold I'd felt climbing out that window. If we get him declared incompetent, Calvin gets power of attorney. Simple as that. And we move him into a facility before anybody asks questions. Calvin's voice, almost bored. He's got that heart medication. People skip doses all the time. Happens to old folks every day. The room spun around me. I had to grab the edge of the desk to keep from going down. Gerald made muffled noises behind the tape, but Walter ignored him completely. "Eleanor found this," Walter said softly. She put a recording app on Calvin's phone back when he came over to fix her tablet, and she found out everything. She knew, Marcus. She knew they were planning something, and I believe with everything in me that's exactly why she's gone. "Why didn't she tell me?" I whispered. Walter shook his head slowly. "Because she knew you, Marcus. She knew you'd confront them head on, and she was terrified of what they'd do to stop you before she could build a case strong enough to protect you." He crossed to a bookshelf along the wall and pressed something I couldn't see, and the whole section slid back to reveal a small steel safe built into the wall. "She didn't just work nursing, Marcus," he said, spinning the dial. "For the last 6 years of her career, she also consulted for hospital risk management, fraud cases, elder exploitation, that kind of thing. She was sharper than every administrator on that floor, including me. And before she passed, she moved your savings somewhere they can't touch it. The safe door swung open, and inside wasn't cash. It was hard drives, folders, and one sealed envelope with my name written across it in Eleanor's hand. Your daughter thinks she's about to inherit a paid-off house and your pension," Walter said, pulling a small revolver from a drawer and setting it on the desk beside the folder, not pointed at anyone, just present, a fact in the room. "She's wrong, and she's walking straight into something Eleanor built to stop her." I looked at that gun. I looked at Gerald, trembling in the corner. I looked at the envelope with my late wife's handwriting on it, and I picked it up, feeling the weight of it like it was something alive. "What do I have to do?" I asked. "Go back," Walter said. "Let them think they've won. Be the confused, grieving old man they already believe you are." He handed me a small, clear earpiece. "I'll be listening the whole time." And he set a small orange pill bottle in my palm. "These are sugar pills, identical to your blood pressure medication. Renee already swapped your real ones with something dangerous. We found the receipt for it on Calvin's card. If you take even one of hers, your heart won't survive the night." My hand didn't shake when I took that bottle. "I'll call you a cab," Walter said. "Go back. Tell them you got overwhelmed and went for a walk to clear your head. Tell them you're ready to handle whatever paperwork they need." I stood up straighter than I had in days. I wasn't Marcus the grieving widower anymore. I was about to give the performance of my entire life. The cab ride back felt like a sentence being carried out. I rolled that little orange bottle between my fingers the whole way. My shield, my weapon, the only thing standing between me and whatever they had planned for tonight. When I climbed out in front of my own house, the party crowd had thinned. Just a few cars left, the porch light glowing weak and yellow. I messed my collar, rubbed my eyes red, let my shoulders sag forward like a man who'd been crying in an alley somewhere. I splashed a little of the bourbon I kept hidden in the truck onto my collar, not into my mouth, onto the fabric, because I needed to smell like defeat. Renee threw the door open before I even reached the steps. "Where have you been?" she snapped, grabbing my arm and yanking me inside harder than necessary. "We've been worried sick. Do you know how it looked, you disappearing from your own wife's repast?" I let my knees buckle slightly. Let my words come out slurred. "I just needed some air," I mumbled. "I went to walk by the lake. I wanted to think about her." Calvin came out from the kitchen holding a glass of my good scotch, the bottle I'd been saving since my retirement party. "He smells like a liquor store," he said to Renee. Disgust and relief mixed together on his face. "Real classy, Pop, drinking the day we bury Mom." I let myself slide down against the wall until I was sitting on the floor, my head in my hands, and the exhaustion I performed wasn't entirely an act, because the real grief underneath it was very, very real. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I don't know how to do this without her. My chest hurts." Renee scoffed, stepped right over my legs like I was nothing more than laundry on the floor. "Get him up," she told Calvin. "We need him sharp tomorrow. The notary's coming at 9 to handle the paperwork on the house." Calvin hauled me up roughly under the arms and dropped me into Eleanor's favorite recliner, the one she used to read her mystery novels in every night. "My medicine," I stammered, patting my pockets. My heart's racing something terrible. Renee walked to the mantel where a row of pill bottles sat and tossed one into my lap without even looking at me. "Take it and go to sleep," she said. "We're tired of looking after you." I turned my body slightly, palmed the dangerous bottle, and swapped it smooth as anything for the one Walter gave me, shaking out 2 sugar pills and dry swallowing them in front of them both. "There," I gasped. "I took it. Just let me rest a minute." "Good," Calvin said, flipping off the overhead light and leaving me in the dim glow of a single lamp. "Go to sleep, old man." I let my head fall back, closed my eyes, but I did not sleep. I breathed slow and even, counted in my head, added a soft, ragged snore for good measure. Minutes passed in silence. Then I heard the clink of a bottle against glass. "You think he's out?" Renee's voice, sharp now, no longer pretending. "He's out," Calvin answered. "Took a double dose, plus all that bourbon. He'll be lucky if he wakes up breathing tomorrow." "Don't say that," Renee hissed, though there wasn't much conviction behind it. "He has to wake up long enough to sign. If he dies tonight before the paperwork's done, this whole house goes into probate, and we're stuck waiting 6 months we don't have." "The collection agency on that loan isn't playing around, Calvin. They want their money by Friday. My son, my own daughter, talking about my death like a scheduling inconvenience." "He'll sign," Calvin said. "You saw him tonight. He's a wreck. He'll sign whatever I put in front of him just to make the conversation stop. He's always been soft like that. Soft." That word cut through me sharper than anything else they'd said all night. I thought of every double shift I drove so Renee could have a roof over her head and shoes on her feet. I thought of teaching her to drive in an empty church parking lot on Sunday mornings. I wasn't soft. I was a father who had given everything he had, and somewhere along the way, that had gotten twisted into something to be exploited rather than honored. "I hate this house," Renee said, her heels clicking as she paced the room. "It smells like mothballs and old people. Once the ink's dry, I'm gutting that kitchen, and Mama's garden out back, I'm having it paved for a deck." My chest tightened at the thought of Eleanor's tomato plants and her rose bushes torn out and covered in concrete. "You can do whatever you want once it's ours," Calvin said, his voice closer now, standing right over the recliner. I could smell the scotch on his breath. "Once we sell and clear the debt, we put him somewhere cheap. I already found a place over on the east side. They've got a bed open next week. I knew that facility by name. It had been written up twice in the local paper for neglect. That was the retirement my own son-in-law had picked out for me without a second thought. A hand landed on my shoulder, shaking me gently, testing. I let my head loll to the side, mouth slack, completely limp. "Out cold," Calvin said. "Let's go up," Renee answered. "I can't stand looking at him like this. It's depressing." "And grab the rest of Mama's jewelry from the bedroom before we go. The pawn shop opens early." I listened to their footsteps climb the stairs. Eleanor and I had walked up together every single night for 3 decades. I heard the bedroom door close. Only then did I open my eyes. "Marcus," I whispered, tapping the earpiece. "I'm here," Walter answered instantly. I heard every word of that. "It's all recorded. The debt, the plan, the nursing home, all of it." "Good," I said, standing up slow and steady, my legs stronger than they'd felt in years. "I'm going to check the bedroom cameras. If they're stealing jewelry, I want it on tape." "Be careful, Marcus," Walter said. "If they catch you awake, they won't." I cut him off. "They think I'm already gone. Let them keep thinking that." The next morning, sunlight came through the kitchen window the way it always had. Golden and ordinary, like the world hadn't tilted sideways the night before. I sat at the head of our oak table, the same table where I taught Renee her multiplication tables, where Eleanor and I had once planned our whole retirement over coffee. Now it felt like a negotiating table, and I was the hostage. Renee hummed while she flipped pancakes, playing the part of the devoted daughter so well it nearly turned my stomach. "Mornin', Daddy," Calvin said, sliding a plate in front of me. "Already dressed sharp in his good gray suit. Eat up, big day today." I picked at the food, let my hand tremble just enough that the fork clattered against the plate. "Didn't sleep much," I mumbled. "House feels too quiet without her." Renee sat across from me, eyes on her phone more than on my face. "That's actually what we wanted to talk to you about," she said. "We've been thinking real hard about your future, Daddy. We don't want you carrying this burden alone." Calvin reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of papers, dropping them on the table with a heavy thud that echoed through the kitchen. "Just some paperwork to update the house records now that Mom's gone," he said, smooth and rehearsed. "Standard stuff. The county requires it." We already had Gerald look it over. I put on my reading glasses slow, adjusting them like my hands didn't work right anymore. I recognized the layout immediately, the spacing, the legal weight of the language even through the deliberately confusing print. This wasn't a county form. This was a quitclaim deed, a document that would sign my own house clean out of my name. The print's awful small, I complained, leaning in close. What's this part here say? About releasing claims. Calvin's jaw tightened. That's just insurance language, Pop. Don't worry about the fine print. That's what we pay lawyers for. Sign where the sticky notes are. The notary's coming in 20 minutes. I don't know, I said, pushing the papers back an inch. My eyes are blurry this morning. Maybe I should have Walter look it over first. He handles paperwork like this all the time at the hospital. Renee's coffee cup hit the table hard enough to slosh over the rim. For God's sake, Daddy, she snapped, the kindness sliding off her face like wet paint. We don't have time for you dragging this all over town. Walter Greer doesn't care about your house. She leaned across the table, close enough that her floral perfume hit me like a wall. You can't afford this place on your own. Do you understand that? Property tax alone is $18,000 a year. Your pension doesn't cover that, and you know it. I have savings, I stammered, letting my voice quiver. Mama's gone, Daddy, Renee said, the words landing like a slap across the whole kitchen. You're alone now. If you don't sign this, the state takes the house to cover your medical bills anyway. We're trying to save what's left for the family. I looked at the pen sitting on top of that stack of lies. I looked at my son-in-law, refusing to meet my eyes. I picked up the pen, hovered it over the line, and watched Renee's shoulders relax, watched her believe she'd already won. That's when I reached for my coffee mug with my other hand and let my wrist jerk, a sharp, unnatural spasm. The full mug tipped and then launched clean across the table, scalding coffee flooding over every page of that deed, the ink bleeding and smearing before anyone could grab a napkin. Oh no! I cried out, knocking my chair back as I jumped up. My hand, it just seized up on me. You idiot, Renee screamed, snatching at the ruined papers, but it was already too late, the pages dissolving into pulp under her fingers. That was the only copy, Calvin shouted, standing so fast his chair clattered to the floor. Dad, you can't hand a soaked rag to the county clerk. We've got to start the whole process over. I stood there wringing my hands, the picture of a sorry old fool. I'm so sorry, I muttered. I'm just so sorry. 2 days, Renee said, pacing now, hands pulling at her own hair. Calvin, the loan doesn't fund if the title isn't recorded by Friday. She turned on me with eyes gone flat and cold. You know what, Daddy? Maybe this is a sign. Maybe you really can't be trusted to handle yourself anymore. I had bought myself 48 hours. And in those 48 hours, everything Walter and I had built came down on them at once. By Thursday morning, 2 detectives were standing in my driveway with a warrant, holding up that very recording from Eleanor's file, the conversation about power of attorney and skip medication, and a man's pension being more important than his life. By Thursday afternoon, Renee was in handcuffs in the same driveway, where she'd once whispered about getting me to sign before her brother showed up, except there was no brother. There had only ever been a daughter and a son-in-law and a debt too big to climb out of, honestly. 6 months later, I stood in a visitation room that smelled like bleach and old regret, sitting across from my daughter through a thick pane of plexiglass. She'd lost weight. Her hair, always so carefully done, was pulled back plain and tired. Daddy, she said into the phone, her voice cracking, you came. I knew you'd come. She didn't ask how I was holding up. She leaned in close to the glass instead. I need you to get me a real lawyer. This public defender doesn't know what he's doing. Calvin's trying to say the whole thing was my idea. You've got money now. I saw the house sold. You could hire somebody good, get me an appeal. Even behind that glass, even after everything, she still saw a wallet sitting across from her instead of a father. I'm not here about a lawyer, Renee, I said, calm in a way that surprised even me. I'm here to say goodbye. Panic flashed across her face. What do you mean goodbye? You can't just leave me in here, Daddy. It's awful in here. Please, just $5,000 for commissary. For protection. I'm begging you. I reached into my jacket pocket, and her eyes lit up like she thought I was pulling out a checkbook. Instead, I pulled out a photograph, Eleanor laughing in her garden, dirt on her hands, sun in her hair, taken years before any of this began. I pressed it flat against the glass. "Do you remember her like this?" I asked. Renee blinked, staring at the photo, saying nothing. "This is why I'm not helping you," I told her. "Every time I think about writing you a check, I remember her struggling for breath while you and Calvin were checking interest rates on a loan." I put the photo back in my pocket. "I donated it, Renee, all of it. The house, money, her pension, every dollar. It's gone, and it's gone to people who actually need protecting from family members just like you." She screamed at me through that glass, pounding the receiver against the wall, calling me cruel, calling me crazy, saying I owed her. I didn't hear most of it. The glass was thick enough to swallow sound, if you let it. I stood, turned my back, and walked out of that building and into the kind of sunlight that feels like it's washing something off of you. My truck was waiting in the lot, same one I'd driven for years, Eleanor's photo sitting on the dash next to a fishing rod still wrapped in its plastic. I touched the photo before I started the engine. "We did it, B," I said out loud, even though there was nobody there to hear it but me. "It's finished." I drove north out of Cleveland that evening, past the city limits, toward a small cabin on a lake near the Pennsylvania line, where the cell signal is weak and the water runs cold and clean. I used what was left after the foundation to set something up in Eleanor's name, a fund that helps older folks in our community who are getting squeezed out of their own homes by people who are supposed to love them. Every time that fund saves somebody, I feel like Eleanor's sending me a little message from wherever she's resting, telling me the truth always finds its way out into the light, even when greed tries its hardest to bury it. They say revenge is supposed to feel sweet. I didn't find sweetness in any of this. I found something steadier than that, something closer to peace. Justice was never about getting even with my daughter. It was about protecting what Eleanor and I built together for 38 years and making sure nobody could ever again mistake an old man's love for weakness. If you've ever had to let go of family to save your own life, tell me about it in the comments. I read every single one. It's a hard road to walk, family, but I promise you, there's daylight waiting on the other side of it. Stay close, stay sharp, and never let anybody convince you that you're worth less than the love you've spent a lifetime giving away. I'll see you in the next story. Love isn't measured by the size of an inheritance you leave behind, but by the dignity you protect along the way. Marcus didn't win by getting even. He won by refusing to let greed rewrite what 38 years of marriage actually meant. Sometimes the bravest thing a tired heart can do is walk away quietly, choose peace over bitterness, and let the truth do the rest of the talking. A small note for you. This story was imagined and written by AI purely for entertainment, though we hope its gentle life lesson still found its way to your heart.